Hi, welcome to Key to Pictures. All right, in this video we are going to talk about depth of field and what it is and why you need to know about it and how it relates to you. So first of all, depth of field refers to that focus plane that you get when you're changing your aperture. So remember, when you have a very wide open aperture, meaning it's wide open in your lens, and it's a very small number, so let's say you have an aperture of f1.8, then your focal plane or your depth of field is smaller, okay? And it's just what it says, it is a plane, so that goes all the way to infinity this way in focus, and it will go all the way to infinity the other way in focus. But it'll just be out of focus in front and behind your focal plane or your depth of field. And it doesn't, a focus doesn't necessarily all of a sudden begin focusing and end focus. It kind of has a gradual feel to it, okay? So like right in the middle, or it's really kind of a third of the front third of your focus plane, that's kind of the sweet spot of where it is sharp and crisp, okay? So depth of field, like I said, is that field basically of focus, that plane of focus. And that depth of focus, as we know, changes when you change your aperture, which is the f-stop. So if you have a very low number or a very wide open aperture, you have a smaller plane. And if you have a very high number or a very small opening in your lens, then you have a much wider depth of field or a much wider focus. But that plane or that depth of field can also change when you, depending on the lens that you have and depending on your proximity to your subject. So your focus plane will change considerably when you are closer to your subject. You're going to have a much smaller plane of focus. And same is true if you're very far from your subject, you're going to have a wider plane of focus. So let's take a look at an actual depth of field calculator. And so, of course, there's an app for depth of field. And I was so excited to get an iPhone a couple years ago because of this app. And what it does is you can put in, and I'm going to show this to you, you can put in your focal length, so your lens length. You can put in your aperture and the distance that you are from your subject, and it will calculate how wide of a plane of focus you have and at what point that focus starts being in focus and ends the focus. It gives you all these things in feet or meters. I have to understand feet. So, for example, I put in, you have to, on your depth of field calculator, and they're just free. You can get you can buy them. You can buy an app, a depth of field calculator app, or just get a free one. And I've just gotten a free one. And this one, I believe, is called Simple Depth of Field. Okay, so I put in a 50 millimeter lens. And remember, that's just kind of a nice even lens. And let's say I have an aperture of 5.6. And let's say I'm about 10 feet from my subject, okay? So it's telling me that my depth of field or my focus plane is 2 feet 9 inches wide. So, you've got about this much depth of field. And then it's telling me that the start of the focus is at 8 feet 10 inches and the end of the focus is at 11 feet 7 inches, okay? So let's change it real quick. Let's say we change our aperture to 1.8. And let's see how much of a narrower depth of field or plane of focus we have. So first of all, we only have now 10 inches of focus plane. And then it shows you that the start of the focus plane is at 9 feet 7 inches. The end is at 10 feet 5 inches, okay? So how does this help you? Before I had this, I thought, oh, well, I'll take this out on a photo shoot and I'll put it in and then I'll see how close or how far away my subject is and put it all in, then I'll know my plane of focus. However, I don't work like that because number one, I'm simple and I don't like a lot of extra gear. And number two, it just isn't feasible to have your family or have your subject wait while you're, calculating your depth of field, measuring how far they are from you. So I don't get on a lot, but it is kind of neat to take a look at it and see how that depth of field changes considerably with your lenses and with how far or how close you are to your subject. It's going to really give you kind of a mindset of where to place your subject and what kind of an aperture you need when you have a certain lens on your camera or you're a certain distance away. So let me go ahead and tell you how this will also help you in a real life situation. So say you are in a situation where you're taking a picture of 3 people, 3 or more, and when you're taking a picture of quite a few people, you usually want a little bit of a higher number of your f-stop, so a little bit smaller opening, so that you can have that wider depth of field, okay, so that everyone will be in focus. However, let's say that you're kind of in a low light situation. So let's say that you put your camera on an f-stop of 5.6, and you look, because you want a 5.6 to give enough focus, but then you look at your shutter speed and your shutter speed is too low. Let's say your shutter speed is only 1/80th of a second or something like that. Well, that's too slow. You're going to get too much camera blur. So you can either A, increase your ISO to be able to have a faster shutter speed, or B, you can decrease your aperture to give you a faster shutter speed. But if you decrease your aperture, remember, you're going to have a little bit more narrow of a depth of field. However, knowing this, that we know about depth of field and the proximity to a person, that the further away you are, the wider your plane of focus. So what you can do is you can get further back from your subject. You can, first of all, put your aperture on, say, a 2.2, which is normally a very narrow depth of field. However, if you stand quite far away from your subject, your depth of field is going to get wider, 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 wider. So that you can A, keep a lower ISO, B, have a wider opening in your lens, which is a smaller aperture, and C, you're going to be able to get everyone in focus, because as you stand back, you're going to widen out your depth of field. So that's why I can take pictures of people, of groups of people at, say, a 2.2 or a very low aperture like that, because I understand that I can go further back and it's going to increase my depth of field. So it's a great little piece of knowledge. It's something that I didn't know when I first started out. I didn't know for a long time, and then when I figured it out, it was kind of like this light bulb going on. So I hope you use it, and like I said before, get out your depth of field calculator. There's a lot of calculators online that are free as well if you don't have an app to use. And just go through it and see and start to understand those relationships between proximity, lens length, and your aperture. So I hope you make it a great day, and I will see you soon.